Welcome, everybody. We will get started. We're excited to be joined by Representative Joe Neguse, Louisville Mayor Ashley Staltzman, a number of legislators that are with us here as well. Representative Snyder, Senator Fenberg, Representative Burnett, Senator Story, Representative Valdez, Senator Lee, Judy Amabile, Representative Amabile, Representative Burnett, our Lieutenant Governor Dan Primavera. Are all joined us today, and of course also the leaders of Colorado's emergency response, Public Safety Director Stan Hilkey, Division of Fire Prevention and Control Mike Morgan. Just in the last 2 years, Colorado has experienced the 3 largest wildfires in the history of our state in the summer of 2020. And then just 4 months ago, the most destructive fire in the history of our state, the Marshall Fire. And at that same time, what we're really seeing is Colorado is going from preparing for just a fire season to a year-round threat and a year-round response. And that's really the evolution of fire preparedness here in Colorado, upping the bar on mitigation and preparing for rapid year-round response. Experts are putting fire danger at our state at extreme levels. The combination of high temperatures, gusting winds, drought conditions in large parts of our state lead to an even higher risk than normal. During the entire month of April, except for 2 days, our state has been at either high risk or has been experiencing a fire. It's just remarkable in the last week alone how much my phone has been lighting up with notices of all the fires that are incoming here in our state. And it's so dependent on weather conditions as to what can spread and where. We've seen fires just in the last week. Monte Vista, near Longmont, near Gypsum and Dotsera, Fort Lyon, Custer County, and many others. And this is just April, if we can believe it. That's just the last week. I've got to see many of the worst case fires firsthand. Of course, the Marshall fires, the devastation, over 1,000 homes lost. The night of the Marshall fires, the days after, got so many text messages from friends and family, just checking on people who live in the area, letting them know if they're okay, if they have a home to return to. And of course, over 1,000 families ultimately did not. We got to hear from families who lost everything. We set up a rapid emergency response center, walk through the divisions that have been reduced to rubble. And of course, the state wants to partner to build back as quickly as possible, as well as helping to fill gaps where we can with regards to people's insurance and other emergency coverage. We know that this issue is about more than just one fire. It's really about tackling the increased fire threat. It's a combination of climate, drought, increased population, and increased utilization of our wildlands, all conspiring together to lead to higher risk levels than Colorado's ever had in our history. This legislation we're highlighting today provides critical relief for people that are impacted by the fires, like the Marshall Fire in Boulder, investing $15 million to give Coloradans more tools to fight these fires in the immediate future, helping us prevent small flames from becoming destructive forces of nature. That's paid for by savings that are incurred due to a larger than expected FEMA reimbursement from the 2020 fires. This funding supports increased aerial response, the extension of our contract of a large air tanker, adding a second large air tanker. 2 Type 1 helicopters will be added, which are the largest and fastest flying to respond to wildland fires, rapid response, hundreds of gallons of water and flame retardant. And Colorado is not alone in facing the increased fire threats, so it's important to note that the reason it's so critical to reserve these capabilities is we are competing with other states to extend these contracts. And many of these fires hit at the same time. It could be California, Oregon, Idaho, Colorado. We want to make sure that Colorado is ready. We also need to make sure we have a 24/7 dispatch system, allowing localities in the state to get fires and firefighters out more quickly to have an impact. And I want to thank President Fenberg for leading these critical efforts. Representative Cutter as well, who couldn't join us today, Stan Hilkey, Mike Morgan. Just later today, we'll be hosting the annual wildfire briefing to speak on the specific natures of the threats that are faced in various parts of our state for this year. And now I want to turn it over to the leader of many of these efforts in the state legislature on fire preparedness and resiliency, Senate President Steve Fenberg.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you everybody for being here today. Especially thank you to all of those who are standing up here who have played such a critical role one way or another, whether the legislators who have been really leading on this, the local government officials who have been working so closely with their community every single day on recovery, whether it's the folks here that are actually on the front lines and working with folks who are fighting these fires that are so destructive. Thank you for all of your work and commitment. As the governor said, we have seen dozens of wildfires just this year already, and it's April. At least 6 have started this week alone. The Denver Post this morning reported that we have probably the highest fire danger today than we've seen in over a decade. And of course, at the end of last year, we had the Marshall Fire, which was the most destructive in state history. That blaze started in December. Think about that. December, we had the most destructive wildfire in state history. There's no question we are living through the early stages of the climate change crisis right now. This is in many ways an emergency. We are not going to sit back and watch our state go up in flames, our communities devastated, our neighbors losing everything that they have. We have no choice, and we are eager to continue to take bold action. For the last few years, the General Assembly really has been taking action. We have worked tirelessly to put different pieces in place so that we have the resources to respond to wildfires, but not just to respond to when they happen, but to make sure we are doing mitigation efforts, helping homeowners, et cetera, to reduce the risk. Whether it's investing in equipment for our thousands of volunteer firefighters that do a lot of this work on the front lines all over the state, whether it's increasing grants for homeowners to clean up brush and remove fuels from around their property, or last year when we passed a bill to purchase the state-of-the-art firefighting helicopter, the Firehawk, that will be an incredibly powerful tool in the toolbox for fighting fires in the future. We have been building the state's resources to respond to these types of events for several years now. However, today, as the governor mentioned, we are announcing, I think, some of our most aggressive efforts as in that plan to date. Senate Bill 206 is one of those bills, although there are several bills that we will be passing this General Assembly. But I want to talk for a minute about that important bill that we introduced a few days ago. First, it does a few things. It creates 2 grant funds for folks who have experienced the devastation of these horrible wildfires recently. It helps residents, it helps small businesses, it helps the local governments themselves to build back, and not just build back, but to build back better in a way that is more resilient, that takes into account the climate emergency that we have, so that if there are future devastating wildfires, that actually that community will be more ready for responding to that crisis. These are going to help people in the Marshall Fire, in East Troublesome, and in other disasters. But we also know that there are more disasters around the corner, and these funds are going to be critical to help people respond and build back in the best way possible. These funds also, they're going to help a homeowner pay for rebuilding costs, to do it in a way, again, that is more fire resistant, to help a small business get their doors open and begin to provide services to their community, to help a local government with lost revenue that is inevitably part of the outcome of these disasters. Although these funds can't replace what people have had and what they've built in their homes and with their families, they will help them build back and ensure that they remain a part of their community, that they are a part of. And many folks are facing a really difficult decision on what to do now. Do they build back? Do they keep fighting with their insurance company to get as much funding as they can so they can do that build back? Can they afford, putting in a new foundation after they realize that maybe it does need to be replaced? Or should they move and start a new life somewhere else? We want to do everything we can to make sure people have the resources and the ability to stay in their communities that they love and they've been a part of for so long. Second, Senate Bill 260 also does something that is not just responding to the disasters we have seen, but it's looking forward. It will create the Office of Climate Preparedness for the state of Colorado. This office will be tasked with coordinating disaster recovery efforts amongst agencies with local partners to better respond to natural disaster emergencies when they happen in the future. The office will be in charge of developing a climate preparedness roadmap. This will be not a report that sits on a shelf. This will be an action plan, a step-by-step action plan on what we can do as a state to be better prepared for the climate-induced disasters that we know are still coming. Lastly, we know that we may very well be heading into the worst fire season in our state's history. Of course, I hope I am terribly wrong about that, but we need to prepare for the worst case scenario that the facts on the ground are telling us. So today, as the governor mentioned, we are also incredibly excited and pleased to announce that we'll be investing an additional nearly $20 million because of the additional funds that we are going to be getting from the federal government because of the FEMA reimbursements to respond specifically to this upcoming fire season that obviously has already begun. Those funds will go to contracts for additional air tankers and helicopters to quickly and decisively respond to fires before they get out of control. We will ensure that we have year-round and expanded dispatch services to immediately respond when a fire is spotted. We'll have new tech systems for on-the-ground firefighting coordination that we have never been able to have before, especially in some of these remote areas where these fires start. This package means that Colorado will be heading into the summer months with the most aggressive, most resourced fire response team we have ever had by far, and we need it. And so today we are taking that action to make sure we are ready for what could be a very devastating fire season if we are unprepared. And we are saying today that we are doing everything we can to be ready for this upcoming season. We have to think long-term, though, about this problem. It's not just about responding to a fire or to one fire season, but we need to think long-term about mitigation and preparing with new technologies and ensuring that we are doing year-round, multi-year forest management practices because we need to be thinking about the new normal we are living in and responding in kind and making sure that our state is prepared for that long-term potential for disaster. Today, we are taking a huge step forward, but of course, the real work still lies ahead in responding to the fires that we know are going to be happening this season, in doing the long-term mitigation work, and putting together action plans to make sure our communities are safe and prepared for these crises to come. Thank you all again for being here. Now, I want to turn it over to my good friend, Representative Joe Neguse.
Well, thank you, President Fenberg, and thank you to the governor for hosting this press conference this morning and for your leadership on these critical issues. I'd also like to take a moment to thank all of the state leaders who are here this morning, folks like Mike Morgan, Stan Hilkey, who do an incredible job protecting our state, keeping us safe, and dealing with the increased wildfire threats across Colorado. You've heard President Fenberg and the governor both state it. I think it's worth repeating that the wildfire threat here in Colorado is unprecedented. In the last week alone, orders were issued to evacuate for homes in Longmont, Lyons, Gypsum, Boulder, Monte Vista, Trinidad, Eagle County, every corner of our state. And in the last 2 years, we have dealt with historic fire after historic fire, including many of which are in my congressional district. The East Troublesome Fire in Grand County, the Cameron Peak Fire in Larimer County, and of course, the most destructive fire in our state's history, the Marshall Fire, which struck our state and engulfed our communities in December, as President Fenberg mentioned. Coloradans across the state are facing the same unsettling reality, which is that our communities are at increasing threat. And it is why we can no longer wait, that we have to act now to protect our communities from the encroaching threat of these fires and other climate-fueled natural disasters. And that's why I'm so proud to be here today, to join these state leaders as they announce a series of steps that I think could make a real difference for our state. First, let me thank President Fenberg and Governor Polis for the legislation that they've introduced specifically around the Marshall Fire to help my constituents, our shared constituency, as they deal with the consequences of that terrible fire, as well as the increased investments in our firefighting capability. Working with Senator Bennett, who couldn't be here today, sends his regrets, and Senator Hickenlooper, our offices have been working for quite some time to increase the federal FEMA cost share for the response to these natural disasters, specifically the Marshall Fire, the Cameron Peak Fire, and the East Troublesome Fire. We're grateful that FEMA has stepped up to the plate in that regard, and grateful to the state that they have decided to use those cost savings on these incredibly important priorities, appropriating additional relief for the victims of the Marshall Fire and the East Troublesome Fire, and then increasing investments in our firefighting capabilities and equipment. You heard some of the increased expanded reservations for helicopters, the tanker, and much more as we deal with an unprecedented wildfire risk. Literally, anyone who opens up the Denver Post this morning would have seen that the conditions on the ground today are unprecedented, and unfortunately they are likely to continue for the foreseeable future. So that expansion of firefighting capabilities couldn't be more important. But beyond those investments, as President Fenberg eloquently put it, we have to think long term. The climate crisis is here, and these climate-fueled disasters are going to continue. We have to be prepared, and that is why I think the Office of Climate Preparedness that the Governor and President Fenberg have proposed is the right step for our state, and in my view, the right step for our country. It is the kind of forward-thinking and nimble, visionary approach that the climate crisis really requires us, to take. And I'm here really on behalf of myself and Senator Bennett, who has been a leader in climate adaptation for years and a great partner on this front, to say that we're going to ensure that the federal government supports these efforts as well. Earlier today, this morning, Senator Bennett and I sent a letter to the House and Senate appropriators in both chambers of Congress, imploring them to adopt a national strategy of climate preparedness, essentially prioritizing climate preparedness, state and local grant programs for mitigation and adaptation, the very same type of programs that this office would be charged with implementing across all appropriation submissions for fiscal year 2023, from defense to ag, from HUD to interior. Every agency ought to be taking this approach, and we believe that there's consensus building in Washington for the appropriators to apply this, and we'll certainly be leading that effort over the coming months as we push our colleagues to implement that strategy. There's more for us to do, and we'll continue to partner with these state legislative leaders and with the governor to ensure that mitigation and adaptation remain a priority of the federal government. Earlier this week, or maybe it was last week, that we were blending together, Governor and I joined the Chief of the Forest Service as well as with the Secretary of the Interior to announce the first tranche of $33 million that will be deployed here in Colorado on the Arapahoe Roosevelt and Pike San Isabel National Forests for mitigation work, just by way of example. But it's a down payment. We've got to do more. And that's why I'm here today to say that we are committed to doing everything we can to support these state efforts, and we'll continue to push forward. With that, it's now my pleasure to introduce one of my mayors in my congressional district, Mayor Ashley Staltzman of Louisville.
Thank you. Good morning. When the Marshall Fire came through our communities in East Boulder County on December 30th, there were very few people who ever thought we would have that kind of devastation in a suburban community where we have access to fire hydrants, where we have access to really fantastic firefighters. And the reality was we now are going to experience devastation like this more than we have in the past because of the climate crisis. That type of darkness has been met with an unbelievable brightness that was unthinkable to us in East Boulder County, and I am here today to thank President Fenberg, the legislators, and Governor Polis for this legislation. our community members will be able to come home because of the help that we're getting from the state. And this support will help family members be able to rebuild their homes better, safer, and healthier than they were built before. And without this, we would not be able to get everyone back home. This is coming at a critical time, and it will help our communities and other communities that unfortunately have to suffer from these types of devastations in the future. So I am so eternally grateful, and I just want to turn it over to Representative Amabile to add her comments.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being here and for inviting me to come and participate in this really important subject. And I have a bunch of things written down, but most of it's already been said, so I'm just going to off the cuff it here. Today is Earth Day, and it's been 52 years since we've been celebrating Earth Day, but we have not actually lived the promise of that first Earth Day, which I was a teenager. Many of you were not even alive, but now is the time. The chickens have come home to roost, as they say, and it is time for us to really address the causes of all these fires. So I represent House District 13, and that is Boulder, the western part, Gilpin, Clear Creek, Grand, and Jackson counties. So a lot of these fires have happened in my district. And last year at a town hall in Grand County, we heard that people were still, 1 year later, not been made whole by their insurance companies and still waiting to get paid out, still waiting to rebuild, still waiting to re-enter their communities and to make those communities whole and economically vibrant. So we set out to write a bill that said, these insurance companies have to do better by their consumers because people had the expectation that they were well insured and would be able to rebuild with the money that they got from their premiums that many of them had been paying for many, many years. I have Commissioner Conway on speed dial now, and I want to thank him for helping me. I'm a relatively new legislator, and it's a big lift to go to work with the insurance companies. But also I will say the insurance companies were very responsive and we were able to get to a good place in this bill. We're going to get more money into people's hands faster and we're going to give them more time to rebuild their homes. And the reason that matters is it's part of the resiliency. So all these other things that we've done are going to help us mitigate fires and be more resilient. And this is a piece of that resiliency. But it's, as Congressman Nagu said, it's just one brick. And we've got to build a wall, a firewall of resilience. So I will be back next year with additional insurance legislation that gets at this issue of underinsurance, which is pervasive around our state. So I also want to just say thank you very much to the governor for really pushing, and to President Fenberg, and to all of the first responders who are out there every day putting their lives on the line to make up for the shortcomings that we've been living with for the last 50 years. Thank you. Oh, and now I'm supposed to introduce Stan Hilkey, the Executive Director of the Department of Public Safety.
Good morning, and I just want to say thank you to the governor, all of the members of the General Assembly here today, our federal delegation, Representative Nagoose and Senator Bennett and others that are not here. Without your help and your assistance, those of us that are in the response mode could never really be in a good response mode. I'm going on nearly 40 years of public safety service as a professional in this state, and I've witnessed a huge change in how wildland fires affect our state. I grew up in northwest Colorado. I was a sheriff in western Colorado, where we saw wildfires that were primarily wide open swaths of forest land or BLM land. Since then, the various factors that have converged on our state have made wildfires far more destructive and dangerous. In the past decades, homes and businesses have expanded into the wildland-urban interface, putting a very significant portion of our state's population in those zones. And meanwhile, climate change, beetle kill, and historic drought conditions have led to more frequent wildfires that spread faster and farther and are more devastating. As you heard the governor say, fire season used to take a break. It does not take a break any longer. Fire season is year-round. Together, these changes mean that more people and property are threatened by bigger and more frequent fires. In fact, again, these points have been made, but they're worth emphasizing. All of the 20 of the state's 20th largest wildfires have occurred since 2002 in the last decade. 3/4 of those fires took place in the last 10 years. Just since 2018, we've experienced 9 of the state's top 20th largest wildfires. It continues to exponentially grow. The good news is that the state of Colorado and our partners are leaning in hard for this season. We work really closely with everything from the volunteer firefighter to the paid firefighter, the local county sheriffs, our state resources. Just within the Department of Public Safety, we have several different divisions that help tackle this problem, and then work with our federal partners as well. The state of Colorado has invested resources, people, training, and technology to improve the readiness of our state for large fires. For example, we can use our heat sensing cameras on our multi-mission aircraft and other technology platforms to detect fires sooner before they grow large. This is actually a big success story for the state of Colorado. We have detected many, many fires that have been put out and never allowed to be a big fire. We can deploy an array of ground and air-based resources to battle fires when they break out, and we've launched new tools to improve communication and mapping to help firefighters on the ground be more effective and safe. The additional money that Senator Fenberg talked about today will be much needed and be aligned and augment our existing resources. You'll hear about that more from Chief Morgan in a second. With that additional funding, we endeavor to increase our contracts on our large air tanker, try to get a second air tanker, add Type 1 helicopters, as the governor said. But keep in mind, we are competing with other states for some of these same resources. It is a finite resource. We'll also be able to implement the recommendation of the Colorado's Fire Commission, which is to coordinate a year-round resource mobilization and dispatching effort, again, as mentioned by Senator Fenberg. So I'm going to get out of the way and let Chief Mike Morgan, our firefighting professional in the state, talk about the resources that we have, how we're going to augment them, and then what we're doing just today. As you saw, the Wildland Fire Red Flag Day today presents a significant danger, and we've made some preparations just to pre-position resources for some of the efforts that are going to happen today. Chief Morgan?
Thank you, Director Hilkey. Real quick, we have wanted fire and we have unwanted fire. Fire can be good on the landscape. It's a natural part of the ecosystem, and in certain conditions, right place, right time, right resources, we use fire as a tool. The conditions we're experiencing now across most of Colorado, and it appears we'll be experiencing over all of Colorado through the summer, are not those that give us the opportunity and many opportunities to do fire on the landscape for resource benefit. So I want to talk about our strategy for unwanted fires, which is what this is really all about. Our strategy for unwanted fires, and we've leaned into this very, very hard over the last several years, is early detection and aggressive initial attack. Catch fires before they get big, spend a few dollars today, and save millions of dollars tomorrow and in the coming months. I want to start by thanking Governor Polis, President Fenberg, the leadership of the Colorado legislature, our federal partners. Thank you, Congressman Neguse, for being here today. As already been mentioned, wildfire is a year-long event for us here in Colorado. Our seasons are longer, as already been mentioned. We're experiencing fires all in every month of the year now, which is, we used to call that an anomaly, and now it seems that when we go for a month without a large catastrophic fire, we're calling that an anomaly. So again, I want to thank the leadership for looking at this problem, taking it seriously, and recognizing the importance of, again, early detection and aggressive initial attack, supporting local agencies to keep fires small. The boots on the ground, the local fire departments, the sheriffs, those are the people that are getting the work done out there initially. We bring these resources in through what we call an enhanced state assistance program, where we invest money in these aviation assets to get folks there to help support the boots on the ground, to slow the fire down and let the firefighters get the fire put out. Was mentioned here as well, the dispatch center, and I can't stress how critical that piece is. As we see these large catastrophic events exceed local capability more and more often, the local public safety answering points or PSAPs are tapping out. They're overwhelmed early. We're building, this gives us the resources to build a system 24/7, 365, where they've got a go-to number to dispatch the extended aviation contracts to support. It will also house what was passed in Senate Bill 21-166, which is the Colorado Coordinated Regional and Statewide Mutual Aid System. So that is leaning in very, very hard to do a better job. Doing this it's proven, and we'll do it again. It will save lives and it will save property. We won't catch all of these fires. I wish I could tell you we could, but we won't. But we will stop many of them, and these resources will reduce the number of fires that exceed our capability. As already been mentioned, our intent, as Director Hilkey said, we're competing with a lot of western states. A lot of what this does is it puts assets into Colorado's operational control, where we're making decisions around where these assets are being. For years, historically, we've relied on the federal government to provide those resources for us, but when we do that, we're competing with 19 other states on where those resources are placed. And I've been in this business almost like Director Hilkey, I've been 36 years. I've seen more and more over the years in my career, seeing the more opportunity, the need for this stuff that were not available to us because they were already on a fire in Wyoming or California or Montana, and we couldn't get the resources we needed when Colorado needed it. So again, I applaud the leadership to get those resources to us under our operational control. A couple other things I want to mention real quick about the leadership and the change that's taken place over the last couple of years. I've mentioned enhanced state assistance. We know, you saw the news over the coming days, that today is probably the most extreme fire conditions we've seen in over a decade. I think since 2006 is what they're saying. What does that mean for us, and what do we do? These additional resources are obviously part of the tools in the toolbox of what we're doing, but a couple things we're doing today as a result of the leadership of the folks standing behind me today is that we have pre-positioned, we have 2 state-owned multi-mission aircraft for early detection. One of those is being pre-positioned over in Mesa County because of the wind conditions here could restrict the ability to move those assets around. We have moved 1 strike team of engines from the western slope over to the Front Range northeast part of the state to help support fires that we're pretty confident are going to emerge over the coming days. We've also we're putting together a strike team for the southeast part of the state from the western slope. We have varying conditions across the state. These resources, these planning tools, and this investment allows us to pre-position resources for days like today when we know we're going to have a bad day, and it helps us to be prepared for that, to support that local fire chief and that local sheriff and that local community. We pre-positioned a seat in Sterling out there on the far northeast. We also have a seat down in Centennial today. We have both of the helicopters. We have 2 Type 2 helicopters currently on that will be pre-positioned on this side of the state as well today. With that, I want to thank again the leadership, Governor Polis, President Fenberg, for leaning into this and giving us the resources to do a better job to protect Coloradoans. And with that, I will turn it over to Governor Polis.
Thank you. I also want to thank First Gentleman Marlon Reese and Superior Mayor Clint Folsom, who joined us as well. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be happy to take some questions.
Governor, last I read, every fire so far this year, every major fire has been man-caused, accidental or otherwise. Is there anything with this plan to kind of address that side?
I think there's a number of fires that there's not been a conclusive investigation on the cause of it. There have been some that identified as caused by human operation. Obviously, we work with the counties on when and if to inform local fire bans. I believe, wasn't there one in Boulder County just put in place? So we generally, those are based on reports that are given by the state on data concerning wind and weather that impacts those. The state also has some resources to assist with enforcement, obviously state parks, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, state troopers, but primarily it's local sheriff's departments.
Una pregunta en español, gobernador. A medida que esto ocurre más seguido cada año, ¿cuál es el plan? Si le podrías decir a nuestra audiencia
Sí.
en español.
Hay más incendios los últimos años que en el pasado y necesita preparar el Estado mejor que antes. Y vamos a alquilar dos aviones de bomberos más y también hacer una presta en más fuerzas para responder rápidamente a incendios donde se ocurran.
We've been talking to fire scientists about, what can the state do, and they say one of the most important things would be a statewide building code that would do a lot of things to build buildings more safely, create dispensable space. Governor, is that something you would support, a statewide building code?
Well, I would just say there's very different characteristics of risk in, for instance, a city, Denver, Littleton, Thornton, and the wildland-urban interface. We've also seen a third category of risk in suburban open space interface, which I would characterize as the Marshall fires. So certainly, when it comes to the wildland interface, mitigation is key. I've toured many fires. I'm sure Mike and San have visited even more fire scars, and it's just remarkable to see how even at the home level, folks that have done the mitigation, removed the fuel near their home, have their homes intact, and homes on both sides are destroyed who didn't do that mitigation. Codes of the actual building are part of that as well, along with where fuel might exist in open space, in community defense perimeters, subdevelopment defense perimeters, as well as the individual home defense perimeter.
But a statewide building code, is that something that you think could make those things more possible?
Well, I can certainly have somebody else speak to that. Again, I think what I was saying is that there are different risk characteristics of an apartment building in Denver than a in-holding in U.S. Forest Service land. Those are certainly not the same thing, and those would not likely be built to the same code.
I'll just add that the Fire Commission, just a matter of days ago, or maybe it was a week ago now, came out with recommendations on what to do when it comes to building codes in the wildland-urban interface. That's something that we're looking at potentially, and it doesn't, establish a statewide code. It creates a path and a process for how to figure out what codes are appropriate for which types of communities, as the governor was saying, because the risk profile is different everywhere. So that is something we're taking into consideration and chatting with the Fire Commission about, and may be included in some of the legislation this year.
Obviously not having a statewide building code, though, means that the state it misses out on tens of millions of dollars in FEMA grants. So is there a way to say there's a statewide building code, and then there's specific requirements for the WUI, and then specific requirements for urban environments, places that are separate? And then also, Governor, I was curious if you could say if you're going to issue a statewide fire ban, if you can do that currently given the conditions.
So on the first question, Jesse, that's essentially what the Fire Commission is recommending, is that we create a process for creating those codes for the different areas around the state. So I think we are going to get there. We need to do it where we have buy-in and all of the communities actually are part of the process in shaping it. But I do think we are headed in that direction to be able to not only create safer communities, but to have access to more of that federal money.
And I would just add, there's been a couple questions on building codes. Community defense perimeters and home defense perimeters are even more effective than the variations in building code at preventing the spread of fires. So again, I think we look at all the tools we have and want to make sure that we're ready for what lies ahead. We always look at data and what comes in. There has not been a statewide fire ban recommended to me by our state fire leadership at this point. But we will always continue to look at what conditions are localized around certain areas with heightened risk and what conditions might exist statewide. Any other questions? Thank you, everybody.